Welcome to the Will and Dave Show. I don't usually do the opener, but Last week, we had a conversation with a couple of nurses, and it really inspired me to dig into one of the motivations for the unrest, for the global unrest, for the localized unrest in Canada and the US, for the riots we see in Europe, the massive amounts of protest around the globe, really. And what's the reasoning for it? Why is it happening? And why are normal people reacting in these extreme manners? Why are governments mandating new medicines? Why are normal, everyday individuals who have had every other kind of medicine under the sun saying, wait a minute, not me? Had a number of conversations about it. And actually, I want to give a shout out, to Brad, number 2 fan Brad. He sent me a video a while ago on fear. And it really made me think about the irrationality of fear. And so I started to dig into fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the known. There are lots of us. Okay, here's a story about my youth. So when I was young, we used to go all over the USA and Canada in a little airplane. It was an older airplane, and one of the things with older airplane engines that you would do is you get up to your cruising altitude of 4,000 feet or 6,000 feet, however high you were going to fly. You would get there and you would alter the fuel-air ratio mixture in flight at altitude, and how you did that was you moved this little lever out, and you moved it out until the motor began to sputter. And then you moved it back in a little bit, and everything was hunky-dory. Every flight we did that, hundreds of flights. I knew nothing was going to happen, and yet every time my dad would reach up, he'd move that mixture lever out, and it would sputter, and my heart would be in my throat. Every time. I knew it was not going to happen. I knew we were not going to crash. Logically, it made no sense for me to be afraid. And every time he did it, I was afraid. The fear of flying. Here's an easy example. It is safe to fly in a big airplane, in a jet. It's safe to fly. It actually, statistically speaking, is one of the safest means of transportation. And yet, many, many folks are afraid of flying. Fear of zombies. Many people. It ranks in the top 12 at number 9 of the fears in the U.S. is fear of zombies. There's a knowledge that we know there are no zombies, and yet we are afraid of them. Fear of ghosts. We're fairly certain there aren't ghosts, and yet we're afraid of them. Here's my point with this monologue. Fear does not have to be rational in order to be honored and respected. folks are going to have fears of things. Fears of vaccinations, fears of COVID, fears of loss of freedoms, many fears are out there, and they're rational for one individual and they're completely irrational for the other one. But the fear is real. And so when you walk up to somebody and you laugh in their face and say, "You're afraid of zombies? What an idiot." If they're afraid of zombies, you haven't helped anything. If anything, you've made it worse. As you are mocking their fear and all the proof in the world that there are no zombies will not alleviate their fear of zombies. In the research for this, I was looking up on how to answer a phobia, or how to reason with a person with a phobia. And the general answer is you don't. You just don't. They may learn their way out of it through either through knowledge or through experience, but you don't reason your way out of a phobia. All the logic in the world will not fix it. So here's my answer. For all of us on either side of any debate, although obviously our ones here now are mandates and COVID and vaccines, is in that nurse's eyes when she says, "I'm not sure I want the vaccine. I'm not sure about the effects." You may look at that and say, "Well, get the vaccine. It's obviously it works." Her fear, her knowledge, or her lack of knowledge, but her fear is very real to her. And for you to mock it or for you to reason it away is not helping any. Or for your friend who wants you to be vaccinated so bad as he doesn't want you in his house as he's afraid of COVID. And unless you're vaccinated, I don't want you in my house. Acknowledge his fear. He doesn't want to get sick. He doesn't want to die. He reads the news reports. He sees these things. He doesn't want to die. Acknowledge the fear. Respect the fear. And on that note, let's thank our sponsors. The sponsor for this episode is Northern Truss, your one-stop shop for floor systems and for all your truss needs. Phone the team at Northern Truss at 250-787-3033, locally owned and operated in Fort St. John, BC.
Hey there, and thanks for tuning into the Will and Dave Show. I'm Susan, and I don't know about you, but I think that in the whole world there's nothing as warm and comforting as a handmade quilt. And quilters the world over have wonderful stories to tell. So to showcase their stories, I host a podcast. It's called Measure Twice, Cut Once, and Other Life Lessons Learned from Quilters. You can tune in to the podcast anywhere that podcast apps are, whatever your favorite is, or you can find a direct link on my website, stitchedbysusan.com. And now, back to the show.
Hey, William.
Hey, Dave. One last quick little paying the bills moment to get out of the way. If you want to support the show in a small way, you can do so for the price of a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/WillAndDaveShow. And for the price of a cup of coffee, you can send a few dollars our way to help and support us as we try to grow the show into what we want it to be, which I think today is a very real a real thing as we talk about what we want the show to be and what we want to do with it.
Yes, it is. It is.
For those of you who are wondering, we don't really need a content advisory today, but here's your content advisory. We're going to talk a little bit about politics and mostly about our show, so there shouldn't be anything particularly hairy today. So that's your advisory or non-advisory.
You never know with what comes out of our mouths in a show, especially when we're talking about
very
half
true.
$1 billion spent on nothing. Yeah.
Good job, Trudeau. Well done.
So last week, William, we had Arissa and Candace on the show, and you were on holidays, and Tim and I had the show, and Arissa sent me a long message, and the root of it was, we're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
On every side of this conversation, there is a level of fear of the unknown, fears of the after effects of the vaccine, fears, of losing your life to COVID. How do you rationalize that? And it really has been on me all week. And I think I mentioned to you early in the week, I really want to do this monologue on, we have to respect the fear.
Mm-hmm.
It's real. The fear is real. Regardless if it's a zombie or if it's a vaccine, the fear of that thing is real.
Mm-hmm.
And when we came off the show, obviously there were differences of opinions, especially with you and some of their ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But the fears for both of you are very real.
Yeah.
And I think that was, in the week I've spent in researching it and listening to folks who deal with phobias, there's no logic to fear.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to look at at the list of phobias in the U.S. right now. The number one is public speaking, is the number one fear of Americans. I mean, I'm a guy who can't talk, and I'm on a show to an audience of 2 people today.
Technically public.
It's public. So if you want to get over your fear of public speaking, just hop on YouTube with a show of 0. You'll get over it really quick. But
I mean, I like to say that I don't have a fear of public speaking, but here I am. I have to work myself up every day just to get in front of a camera. It's almost worse than talking to people in person is doing it in the camera, because in person, once it's done, it's done.
Right.
Now it's forever. It's immortal. It's on the internet now. Any mistake I make here is as good as set in stone.
Even if we delete it, it never goes away.
Yeah, nothing dies
YouTube
on the internet.
keeps it forever. So it made me revise again. I've had to revise my viewpoint on a lot of things. And when I look at the people who don't agree with me, if it be vaccines or COVID, etc., I don't want to reason with them anymore, as I don't think it helps. Here's the data. It doesn't matter. We know there's nothing in the dark that's going to bite you. And yet, how many people, I think it's number 11 on the list, a lot of Americans are afraid of the dark. Isn't logical.
Not American, though.
Well, I was looking, and the list is almost mirrored in Canada. So
yeah, it makes sense. I'd say it's probably pretty consistent across the Western world.
High on that list is actually our bugs and spiders and things. And
centipedes, hard no. Millipedes are fine. Millipedes are adorable. Centipedes, no way.
So what's the difference? One is 100 feet and one is 1,000 feet?
It's the knowledge that millipedes are harmless. There's nothing a millipede can do to hurt me. It literally doesn't have a mouth to bite me with properly. Centipedes are some of the most aggressive insects on the planet. It doesn't matter if you're a giant towering monstrosity in front of them. They're like, oh, it moves, kill it, and they will try to attack you. It's If you ever watch people who are centipedes good pets? No, they're not, because you can't touch them. There is no handling centipedes as a general rule, unless you have a really weird centipede, because they will just attack you on sight. If the option presents itself to bite a thing that moves, they bite it. And just the knowledge that it wants to kill me, even if it can't,
Are
is
we
enough to give
delving
me
into
the
your fears
heebie-jeebies.
right now, William?
Apparently. I mean, this is kind of an episode on fear, I guess.
I
If I'm
guess.
afraid of centipedes and deep water. There you go.
So I was never afraid of beavers, and I don't know if you remember this story, William.
Hmm.
I was never afraid of beavers ever in my life. They're they're on the nickel in Canada, I believe. Is it the nickel that the beaver's
Yeah.
on?
Yeah, it's the nickel.
It's a cute little animal, buck teeth. And we were driving along the highway up there. You kids were young. I don't know if you remember this. And we looked on the
I
side of
don't
the road,
remember
and
it.
there's a beaver walking along the side of the road. And I thought, well, sweet, I'll get my phone out. We'll take a video of the beaver walking along the side of the road. Because what's it going to do? Gnaw me to death? Like, seriously, what's there to be afraid of? And I'm sure your mom will remember the story because she laughed her head off. So I get out of the truck and I hop out with my phone camera and I'm going up to this beaver. And I got within about 3 feet of it. And all of a sudden it jumped at me. Like it jumped up and jumped at me. I don't know what it was going to do, except I jumped higher and farther than the beaver did. Ran back to the truck, got the hell out of there. It was one of those moments where I learned to be afraid of a beaver before I had the fear. Now I don't get quite so close.
It's like, damn, nature, you scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like, oh, you ever seen like the inside of like a turtle's mouth or a penguin's mouth?
No.
Nightmare fuel. They're
Interesting.
built so because they swallow fish whole,
Right.
the insides of their throats are basically full of spikes and spines that only angle in, and so something that goes down their throat can't get back up it.
Oh, I might have to Google that.
And so it looks like a little sarlacc pit inside their mouths. It's horrific. It's
Okay, you
terrifying.
talk for a minute. I'm going to look that up. Okay. I'm
Well,
going to put you on the screen.
now
I'm
that
going to
we've-
look it up and put it on the screen.
Yeah. So now you put me on the spot. But whoa, that's not me. You've got there we go. There I am. I'm gonna backtrack a little bit to your monologue because I didn't really have a chance to chime in on it, and it was new to me as well. I didn't hear any of it beforehand, and I couldn't agree more. Really, like I try to rationalize with people constantly, whether it's online, whether it's in person, and partially due to this conversation that happened off air with the nurses and seeing the episode on air, and just some of the conversations I've been having with people in my own life. I've kind of just there's always like a pressure that I need to convince people, that I need them to be on the same page as me, that I need them to believe the same things that I believe. But I can't, like you say, I can't rationalize their fears and concerns away, no matter how hard I try. It doesn't matter if I'm right or not. It's kind of irrelevant. The fear exists all the same, and I there's nothing I can do or say necessarily that's going to alleviate that. That's a journey that they have to make on their own. And that's not to say that they have to make it to my side to be right. It's just, I mean, to conquer the fear in general, or to to find a place where they're not afraid of a thing, whether that's through getting over a concern, whether that's reading something new that opens their eyes to how it's maybe not what they thought it was, or maybe science moves forward and maybe something comes out that makes them change their minds or not. Who knows? But I'm not going to be the person to do that. And to put that weight on myself that I feel like I need to be the person to do that is a stupid and terrible burden to be packing around everywhere I go.
Okay,
That's
I'm
my
getting
2
there.
cents.
I'm
I
getting
see you
there
still
with
have the old layout. Arissa and Candace there.
Oh, I can take that off. Hold on.
Yeah.
There we go. I just had to get that so I can change
It's a
this.
lovely shot, though. Lovely background, David. Getting
I'm
a little
doing this-
insight into your life.
I'm doing this on the fly here.
We'll do it live.
That's right. Okay, so what was that we wanted to look up?
You look up like a sea turtle throat or inside of sea turtle mouth or whatever. This is real. This is the real content people are here for. Yep, that's it.
Okay, this is the inside of a sea turtle.
That's the inside of a sea turtle mouth.
Isn't that an
like-
alien in the movie Aliens?
Right? You don't think of, when you think sea turtles, you're like, oh, beautiful, majestic sea turtles. That's the inside of their mouths.
So what was the other thing that you said?
I think it's
turtle
penguins. Penguins.
Penguin mouth. If people weren't afraid before, they are
Yeah,
now.
similar idea. There's just spines all the way down. so that whatever goes in can't crawl. Yeah, exactly, right. So
Aren't
whatever goes in
penguins
can't squirm its way
these
back out.
cute little creatures?
Oh yeah, but you've seen penguins. You've seen them, like all the videos of like feeding little baby penguins the fish and everything. They just like
No,
fall and they swallow it
no,
right
my
down.
penguins are Robin Williams and Happy Feet. That is my
Oh my
penguin.
god. Even those penguins in the movie, you see them eat fish and they like just gobble it right down. It just goes right whole down their throat. That's why they have that. They don't chew it, but they need to make sure that the fish, if the fish goes down backwards, it can't try to swim its way back out. It's only going one way.
Sort of like the. Never mind. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, if you guys weren't afraid
turtles all the
before,
way down.
we just moved your fear of vaccines and COVID over to turtles and penguins. Always
know
be
what?
afraid of a penguin.
Got to keep things fresh.
In case you forgot it.
Just blow that
Oh
up
my
nice and
gosh.
big for you. Yep, some nightmare fuel. On the nightmare fuel and in animals' mouths, the one that gets me, and it's hard to find a picture of it that does it justice, because then I think it's a personal fear. It's whale sharks, or I guess any really big sea animal in general, because when they open their mouths, they are so big that you just can't see far. Like, it just goes black. It's so long and so deep of a hole that it just goes black. So you have like whale sharks and basking sharks. Terrify me, just on principle. Like, the idea of ever seeing a basking shark in person makes my skin crawl. Just bleh.
Oh my
Hard no. I'll pass.
Yeah.
That little lovely sojourn right there. That was great. You want to pivot to the election now?
Happy Feet will never be the same. Even
Sorry.
with Robin Williams, Happy Feet will never be the same.
Blessed be his name.
Oh, man.
I will worship the Church of Robin Williams for the rest of my life. That's the only religion I need.
You Canadians.
Us Canadians. Yeah.
I used to think you were smart.
There's your first mistake.
$500 million and almost zero change in the makeup of your government.
Gotta love it.
$600 million. And that's not including the money that they promised to spend if
Yeah.
anybody got elected. So that was just the election cost.
I mean, politicians always follow through their promises, so we're sure it's going to get spent too.
Oh, yeah. If it's spending money, they probably will.
Yeah, it's true.
We wonder why, and this will hook into our previous conversation. We wonder why there is a profound lack of trust in government
Yeah.
when things like this happen and people wake up and say, hey, oh, wait, it's exactly what we had a month ago.
And it's doubly aggravating because it's so painfully transparent why it happened, and it's stupid. Like, it's just stupid.
So
It makes me angry.
So here's what I don't understand, Will, and maybe you can shed some light as you live up in that fair country.
We try.
What went through your mind when you're voting? As I don't believe you voted for Trudeau.
No, I did not. No.
A number of people who I know would not vote for Trudeau, and yet he came into it, and everybody acknowledged he thought he would get a majority government out of all this. He didn't, so he wasted $500 million, a little bit over $500 million, has the same government that he had before. So what's going to happen in the next election?
No idea. I mean, it's tricky. So for those of you who, I'm going to do a little primer on the election. So while we talk about this, people will have context. Justin Trudeau, leader of the Liberal Party, who is the current Prime Minister of Canada, called for an election, which is something that happens pretty regularly for us. It's not like the States where it's on a 4-year schedule. During the course of the election, normally in Canada, there's two primary political parties that have the highest chance. In the States, you basically just have a two-party system. The third parties are almost non-existent. We have plenty of other parties here, but none of which are particularly large at the moment. So currently we have the Liberal and Conservative parties, the big two. Their names are kind of self-explanatory. Next, behind that, you have the NDP, which is the New Democratic Party. They're orange. And then you would have probably Bloc Québécois, which is a political party based almost exclusively in Quebec and pretty much nobody outside of Quebec votes for them, but they actually have more seats than I think any of the other third-party candidates currently. Then you have People's Party of Canada, PPC. They're kind of like the more conservative party. And you have the Green Party. Green Party is exactly what you would think the Green Party is. They're very environmentally focused and arguably the most liberal or most progressive of all the parties, I would think, maybe. Maybe they're tied with NDP for that. NDP is very progressive. But because there's so many different parties, a big theme with this election was vote splitting. And my assumption is that's a good chunk of why Trudeau lost his or didn't get his majority, is because lots of progressives are fed up with the Liberal government not being progressive enough, and they voted for more progressive parties, and they didn't get very far either.
So I have to give Jagmeet Singh some credit.
Jagmeet Singh?
He has an awesome beard.
Oh, in general, man dresses immaculately. He's a gorgeous human being. I hate attaching, like, comparing their looks because they're politicians. Everyone did that with Trudeau. It's like, oh, he's such a handsome prime minister. And I'm like, it's kind of silly, but come on. Jagmeet's beard is just beautiful. Yes, love it.
Like, I don't understand why you guys could make.
I mean, for those of you who don't know, the very first time I ever voted, I voted NDP when I was 19, and I did it exclusively because I really liked Jack Layton's mustache. I had absolutely no real political opinion at the time. I promise that Jagmeet's beard is not the reason I voted NDP this year, but it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt.
So I don't remember his mustache. So I'm going to go look it up.
It was a dad mustache. It was like the exact kind of just chill, easygoing. It wasn't like particularly ostentatious. It was just like, look at that. That is just a peak dad stash.
Isn't that your Uncle Ken right there?
Just about. I hope he sees this.
I don't think he's watched a single episode. I think we're safe.
It's like the kind of stash you imagine him with an apron, says "kiss the cook," sitting at the barbecue with a beer in hand. That's the kind of mustache you picture on him, like a Chris Hadfield kind of mustache. Like, love it. That and Jack Layton was just like a genuinely great politician and apparently person, and sad that he's gone.
Yeah.
I realized it too late. But so yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, to change almost nothing.
Yeah.
If anything, it might have gotten a little bit worse for them. It definitely got worse for the Conservatives. Well, sort of. So, again, for those of you who don't know, for those of you who might be in the States, the way the Canadian election works is somewhat similar to the States in the sense that we vote for our local riding, and then, they have X number of electoral votes, essentially, that go towards their party, correct? That's a really simplistic breakdown of it.
Yeah, it's a generalization of it, yes.
Yeah, it's similar to the Electoral College in the States. So groups like the NDP and the PPC actually got more votes this election than than they usually do, but they still had no changes in their seats, which is to say the NDP, I don't think, lost any, and the PPC didn't gain any. So the PPC is still at 0. They got quite a few votes, actually. They did much better than previous years, but they didn't gain any seats. What happened was they took those votes away from the Conservative Party predominantly. So the Conservative Party, I think, is probably the biggest loser out of all of this. Even though they didn't really lose anything, it looks really bad for them.
So one of the things which came out of the election is this map. And everybody whined about this map.
Mm-hmm.
As this... It's hard to see on the screen, except it is.
Can we zoom in on the map portion of it at all? Yeah, so that's just showing the number of seats or electoral votes, essentially,
right,
that each province brings to the table.
So everybody in the orange is left of that line is angry, and everybody right of that line is happy, or most of them.
Most of them.
And one of the things that, which I tried to point out to people, is that it really is population based.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the States, you suffer from gerrymandering a lot, if I think that's the right term.
Sort of, yeah.
It doesn't happen really in Canada. The zones are pretty much set.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of variety in them. So these are very much population based. Like you see, there's 121 seats in Ontario. A good measure of that is the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, literally has almost 10% of this country's population in it.
Yes.
Just the GTA. It has a population of just shy of 3 million people in a country whose population is like 3.5 million.
So I
So there's a reason that
posted,
they have so many votes.
yeah, I
It's because,
posted online that
yeah.
if you're going to complain about this, how do you want to break your votes up? Do you want
Hmm.
it by land ownership? If you
Yeah,
own
that's fair.
1,100 acres and you live in an apartment, I get 1,100 votes and you get half a vote because you
Yeah,
live in an apartment. How do you want to break it up? Is it going to be on monetary value? If you pay taxes, you get more votes and your number of votes spent.
that's super fair. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see Karl Marx rolling in his grave.
So, how do you want to? The most fair method is the representation on the population.
Yeah,
Is it
which
exact? No, it's not exact. As people move from year to year, and
mhm,
although it's awfully close.
mhm. I'd say
I'm
the only
sure.
way you're ever going to change this system is if you get less people to live in Ontario.
Yeah, yeah.
If there's a strong, consistent change in population towards the West Coast, I imagine you would see some of these numbers change a little bit, or there would at least be cause to change them.
So you've lived in
Currently, there's
Ontario.
I have, yeah.
What's the draw of Ontario over BC or Alberta?
Um, I'm not 100% sure. I think a portion of it, at least, is it's older for starters. So, like when migration in Canada happened way back when, when there was the colonization of North America as a
Right.
whole, and it's come somewhat similar in the States. A lot of your biggest population cities are East Coast. Now, newer cities, like you have your LA and your Vegas and all these things on the West Coast, but they're all newer cities. They're big in their own right, but you
Mm-hmm.
have a much higher density of large cities on the East Coast because that's where quote unquote civilization started when moving across North America was on the
Right.
East Coast. And so Ontario got a head start in having a population. The first major Canadian cities were in that area. Now, places like Newfoundland, New Brunswick, PEI, and Labrador, etc., they're islands for starters, which makes them a
Right.
little harder to be major population points. Also, the terrain there, I think, I've never been, so don't quote me on this, can be a little bit harsher. I would imagine a big part of Ontario is that it was kind of perfect. It was near enough to shipping, near to the States. It was also great for agriculture as well as other
Right.
things because it kind of has a little bit of everything. Because you get to like Manitoba and Saskatchewan, huge for agriculture
Right.
and oil, but not a whole lot else.
Except agriculture is really lousy for population growth, as there is a
Exactly.
family of four for 50,000 acres. Like, you don't.
Exactly. So it's no wonder
Yeah.
they're not dense.
Right.
High agriculture areas will have lower population density.
Yeah.
And while there's a lot to be said for the fact that rural people in any place, especially in Canada, they feel very underrepresented. I love your Aladdin mug. That's adorable. Um,
I was
people
going to
in
bring it up in my
agricultural
fear monologue.
area, yeah, people in rural areas are going to feel underrepresented in government, but it's kind of inevitable in the sense that they are a very small. They're important. Don't get me wrong, but they're a very small portion of the population, and so it's
So,
kind of unfair to lend them a louder voice just because they're spread out more.
so what is your answer then for the people who are left of that line?
Oh
What
God,
is your
I
answer
don't
for
know.
them? Because they're unhappy. A
I
vast
don't have
majority of
one.
them are unhappy.
I I hear, especially here, and especially now with the election passed and people being unhappy that nothing changed and that all this money was wasted. It's after every election, the last two elections in Canada, we hear lots of people talking about what do they call it?
Well, Maverick
They call it
wants
Wexit.
to, Wex it,
After Brexit, we call it Wexit, which is Western Canada splitting off and forming its own government
which
because they view
was
themselves as very separate from the rest of Canada.
which was the Maverick Party, was it not? It
I think
began
the
as
Maverick
Wex.
Party is
It
it's
began as
born out of
Wexit,
that.
and then it moved into the Maverick Party. Yes.
Yeah, they're born from that movement. I think I don't know if they necessarily espouse that exact view anymore, but they're born from that idea that you need people from the West to make decisions about the West, and the
Right.
West is such a huge part of the Canadian economy due to its agriculture and its oil and gas industry that it deserves a bit more attention than it gets. Because right now, the West feels very forgotten in terms of Canadian politics. Population aside, they just feel like they're just left to the wind.
Well, I do. I think Alberta, especially for all the equalization payments that
Hmm.
Alberta has made. And for those of you who don't know in the States, Alberta,
Right.
for a number of years, I believe since the 70s, has made
Almost all
hundreds
the
of billions
Western.
of dollars into the federal coffers.
Yeah. I think the only neutral states or close to neutral, not states, provinces are Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And they're not even neutral themselves. I think they pay into equalization as well. But BC and Alberta pay huge, huge amounts in
Mainly
equalization.
Alberta. Mainly Alberta.
Yeah.
The majority of it's
So,
Alberta oil money.
so for those of you who don't know, all that is basically they're called have provinces. So they make their budgets have an excess or a surplus because of all the oil and gas and agriculture that happens in them, and so they pay a chunk into the budgets of the have not provinces. So
And
mostly
guess where that
Ontario and
money
Quebec,
goes? Ontario and Quebec.
Ontario and Quebec. So they're not making the money, but they are taking it. And so people from the West feel rightly put out by that they're paying for it, but their voice is still minuscule. And not only minuscule to the population, but they just feel snubbed by the suits, by the people in the cities.
And
There's a very big
rightfully
rift.
so.
Absolutely.
Rightfully
Like
so.
as someone who's lived both in the city, close to Toronto at least, and here out in rural Canada, like there is an absolute hard divide
Yes.
between city folk and rural folk, and it's there for a reason. They
So
feel forgotten by their own country.
look at it this way. I'm going to draw a little map, or I'm going to draw a word picture. There's a household with 4 adults in it.
Mm-hmm.
3 of them work, 1 does not work. He does all the housework at the house.
Mm-hmm.
We'll call that one mom.
Okay.
And so the dad makes $100,000 a year. And again, the 2 kids make, for easy math, we'll go for 50,000 each.
Mm-hmm.
And all the money goes into a common pot.
Mm-hmm.
But wait a minute. The dad who makes all this money, he feeds into the common pot, except he doesn't get a vote in any of the expenditures of that $100,000, as he just is one person out of 4.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to feel slighted because I'm paying for half of everything, and that is sort of the feeling of Alberta and BC, especially, and a little bit for Manitoba, that it's Saskatchewan, because it's not. It's this indicative of, I give you guys all this money and you pass it out around among yourselves, and we don't get any back. So it really
Yeah.
is like if the dad gives all the money to the common pot, and then he's got to go out and eat at McDonald's because he's
Mm-hmm.
not good enough to eat at the family table. It
Yeah.
really is what it feels
And
like.
And to go even deeper into that metaphor, I mean, there's certainly value in the case of the mother who brings no income to the pot, but does all the housework. So there's still value in what they do in the cities and with our government and everything. Is it worth, like, is that a fair expenditure? Is the work that the mother's doing worth her quarter share of the pot in your metaphor? I don't know. And in the case of our actual government, I wouldn't think that it's worth it.
Yeah.
I don't think that Ontario should be getting a free out when they can't balance a budget for their province and they just rely on the money from the other provinces.
$600 million to change zero. And you wonder
Change
why
nothing.
there's a lack of trust in government.
Yeah.
And no, we don't
Like,
wonder why
I
there's a
get that.
lack of trust in government.
Yeah.
Well, Will, this is an easy week. This week we don't have a whole lot, which is a good thing because
I think it's a good thing. I think
it's
it's a
been a
good
rough few
palate
weeks.
cleanser. I think it's a rough, yeah, it's been a rough few weeks. But I think it's good. It's hard. I can say for me at least, it's emotionally draining to talk about these subjects that are so divisive regularly, to go into every weekend knowing that we have to, choose our words really carefully because we don't want to, I mean, us as content creators, we don't want to alienate part of our audience by being too harsh or aggressive. And just on a personal level, we don't want to be too harsh or aggressive because we recognize that people matter and their fears matter. So it's difficult and it's draining, but I think it's good because I think we as people are we're being more compassionate. It's causing us to grow. Like showing compassion towards other people is like a muscle Mom loves this metaphor, and I love this metaphor. It's like a muscle that you have to work. Your brain is a muscle, and I think that compassion and these emotions are also like muscles. You have to flex them, and days like there weeks like these make me feel like it's a really underdeveloped muscle. But these talks feel like a good workout. It's got a good burn going in my soul.
Oh man. And on that note, I'm sorry to throw the seahorse or the sea turtle mouth in the middle of your little monologue there.
That's okay.
I meant to put it on
People
preview
listening
mode.
later won't get it. It's fine.
That's right. I don't even know that I'll throw this up as a podcast as it stopped recording locally, so I'd have to get it from YouTube, and I don't know.
Oh, there you go.
I
We'll see.
ran out of hard disk room on my.
If not, it's
My
nice and
computer.
exclusive for you YouTube peoples that are watching.
That's right. So next week we don't know what we're doing yet. We're hoping to have a guest. We have a few lined up in the wings. We don't know where they're going to be or when we're going to get them, but hey, we'll
Playing it
work
by
out
ear, baby.
something. That's right. And until then, William.
Do I have any nice words for our fine listeners?
I was trying to avoid that part and just
Oh,
lead in.
I was waiting for my end, but okay, yeah. Stay safe and don't die, folks. Have a good week.